Hello, you guys. This is going to be part 4 of my 𝗏𝐭𝐫𝐿 commentary series. If you guys haven't watched part 1, 2, or 3 yet, please hop on over and go give those a watch because I am releasing these in chronological order and there is a storyline there that I'm following since I am commentating on the movie. In the first video, I help break down and explain what an autistic internalized meltdown is through the main character Angela having an internalized meltdown. In the second video, I help break down communication differences between autistic folks and non-autistic folks and why a lot of non-autistic people dislike autistic folks because of those communication differences. And in the last video, the third one, I commentate on the harms that indirect communication can have on autistic people within interpersonal relationships and better ways to communicate with your autistic loved ones so everyone can have a symbiotic relationship and be able to meet each other's needs as effectively as possible. In today's video, I will be talking about autistic hyperfocus and how our tendency to monotropically focus is both the source to our greatest superpowers and also the exact thing that disables us at the same time. The thing is, people often see hyperfocus as a flaw because it conflicts with societal expectations of balance, flexibility, and multitasking. In a world that values efficiency across all domains such as work, social life, and self-care, hyperfocus can be seen as an irresponsibility, negligence, or even selfishness. From a neurotypical or neuronormative perspective, this intense hyperfocus can be seen as the refusal to prioritize what matters. But the real issue here isn't hyperfocus itself, right? It's the lack of systems that support it. The challenge isn't fixing the autistic person, it's fixing the environment so that hyperfocus can be utilized rather than punished. I really love this scene because we get to see how she uses her sensitivity to sound for her career. Sensory sensitivities doesn't have to be just a negative trait. We could use it in order to experience sensory joys. We could also use it to our advantage in terms of our jobs. As someone who's sensitive to sound, she hears a lot of these things that other people would miss. And when she goes to school to learn sound design and how to work with all of these technical things, she knows how to objectively take the nuances of what she hears and be able to pull it apart and deconstruct it in ways that other people wouldn't be able to hone in on. This movie is so good at capturing the intricacies of certain autistic traits, even down to the way the character walks. I feel like sometimes you could just tell someone's autistic by the way their body moves. Not saying all autistic folks walk like this, but there's certain attributes of being autistic that affects your proprioception and your vestibular senses and things like that, which means the way your body is moving and the relationship it has with the environment around it. Also other comorbidities like hypermobility and things like that. It means that sometimes the way that we walk is just different. I am very heavy-footed. I've literally been told by people throughout my life, Irene, stop stomping around. You got to be careful when you live above other people because with the way that you're stomping, your downstairs neighbors are gonna be really annoyed by you. I'll walk straight into a wall. I'll walk straight into the edge of a bed or the edge of a couch, or I'll go to grab something and I'll completely miss it. I just feel like the little details of how she's stomping around and how her body moves is one of those little details that most people would miss. But for me, I'm like, yes. There's something therapeutic about having objective skill sets because it takes something that could be so intense and grating, but allows you to gain control of it in a way where you synthesize with it. You know what I'm saying? So sound to her could be so overwhelming on a day-to-day basis, but her being able to fixate on this few second clip and hone in on separating all of the intricate sounds is such a therapeutic way to just take that ball of tangled up yarn and be able to slowly untangle it and neatly roll it up into a ball. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of what we go through when we hyperfixate on something and we just keep going into the activity more and more and we can't come out of it. Most people will be like, oh my God, how are you listening to the same clip over and over again? How are you still doing that thing? But in reality, they don't realize that when we are hyper-focused on something, it's not just the activity itself. It's like one of the only things in our life that gets us to be completely locked in and regulated somehow. And when you finally experience that beautiful moment where everything flows together, you know exactly what to do and what outcome you want and how to get there. And you can't stop until you get to that point. I could literally go down a list of how autistic inertia and monotropic focus impacts us. I've seen some autistic folks get so hyper fixated that they neglect to eat. I do that. On work days, it's very normal for me to go the whole day without eating because I'm so hyper focused on work. I eat my first meal at 8 p.m. when I finish work. And even then, I don't want to stop work. So there's so many days where I stop working because I know my body needs to be taken care of, not because I want to stop working. And if it was up to me, I would just work through the night. I would never sleep. I would never eat. And I would just keep working on projects until I finish it. But I have limitations because of my human body, you know? And even when I say that, I'm not trying to glamorize or demonize this autistic trait. It is just a neutral trait. This neutral trait can oftentimes disable people. This neutral trait can also, for certain people, be their superpower in a sense. It just depends on how you personally decide to interact with that neutral trait. And it depends on what sort of circumstances were you born into, the framework that you were naturally taught and given, and whether or not that framework actually works with your autism or works against it. These are all factors that determine how your specific autistic traits are presented and how it expresses itself. When I say things like I can work from morning till 8 p.m. without eating, to a certain group of people, they might see that as bragging, right? Like, oh, you think you're just such a hard worker and you're working to the detriment of your body. And to another group of people, they might see it as sad because they're like, wow, you're neglecting your body to that point. Some people might think, oh, that's admirable. I wish I could have a job that I was that passionate about where I would neglect myself to that point. But wherever you land on the spectrum, right? What matters is the fact that at the end of the day, it is objectively not healthy to go a whole day without eating. I am aware of that. There are objective facts here that are at play. It's not good to go a whole day without eating. It is good to have a job you're passionate about where you could hyper focus to a point where you would neglect eating. And so there's positives and negatives to this, but what matters is that I am a type of person, because of my neurology, where I will have a tendency to neglect basic ways of taking care of myself when I am so focused and passionate about what I'm doing. And I will willingly do that. I will choose to do that. My neurology is built to do that as well. And so the goal here isn't necessarily to find a job I'm less passionate about where it's easier for me to find balance, or it would encourage me to not hyper focus as much. The answer isn't necessarily either to force myself to not hyper focus for the sake of being normal. The goal is to hone in on this part of me that is just simply a part of who I am, and I have to hone in on it to a certain extent to allow parts of myself to actually shine and build framework around those traits so that I could live a sustainable life. That's the key. Building frameworks to fit you so you can live a sustainable life, not to change yourself in order to fit this idea or concept of what is correct or what is a sustainable life. And that's just the difference between autistic neurology versus autistic physiology. the lesson that we have to continually learn how to integrate properly is how to create a symbiotic flow between our physiology and our neurology. Okay, so now we're going to really see why Angela has all of her very particular routines and rituals. Angela taking care of her teeth and her retainers the way that she does is not just because she has issues with germs or cleanliness. It's because she ultimately is incapable of going to the dentist because of all the sensory nightmares that come with going to the dentist, all of the traumas that is associated to leaving her apartment and going out into the overstimulating world. And so her way of trying to avoid needing to go to the dentist is to make sure that she takes care of her teeth so well that she will never have dental issues. That's the key difference. She's not just super strict about her teeth because she has control issues. She's super strict about her teeth because there's no other way for her to take care of her teeth other than her being very strict about the cleanliness of her teeth.
Can you turn a little left, please, toward the light?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we need to do a root canal.
I take perfect care of my teeth so that I don't need to come in.
And this is part of the nuance of what's so disabling about autism, is that even for higher functioning autistic folks who figure out the exact routines they need to build and uphold to fully support themselves despite not having any other support from anyone else, no community, no help, that can only sustain you for so long before you ultimately hit these very intense and debilitating autistic burnouts. Or it takes one little pebble in your road to throw everything off course. In the context of today's episode, her getting hyper-focused on this one audio clip is enough to derail everything she had going for herself. Everything that she was meticulously upholding in her life. All of a sudden, it's hard for her to take her meds when she needs to take it. Remember to put her retainers in. Remember to keep things as clean as she used to. It's hard for her to focus on her job. It's hard for her to call the construction guy and say, hey, can you stop doing construction so I can focus on my job? All of these things that she had to do in the beginning of the movie, she's no longer able to do. So this is the interesting part of being autistic. We adhere to certain expectations and routines really rigidly, but at the same time, there's this contradicting habit of once we're hyper fixated on something, it's almost like everything else doesn't matter anymore, and we can very easily neglect all of the same exact routines and habits that we so strongly follow otherwise. And this is, two contradictory traits that people would normally be confused by. Like, how are you going to strictly adhere to this one insignificant thing, but then once you're hyper-focused on an audio clip, for example,
I thought it might have been a crime.
You start to struggle with keeping your routines going.
And I believe I may have heard a crime on one of the streams.
Keeping your apartment clean, being able to focus on your relationships and work.
If I heard a crime on one of the streams, who do I tell?
And this is why I think it's so important to understand autism outside of symptoms, because when things like this happen and there's contradictions there, a lot of professionals will say, oh, that doesn't make sense. Autistic folks are supposed to be rigid. I don't know why they're doing that then. That must mean they're not autistic, or that's weird. And then just like almost biasly not care about something if it doesn't fit the narrative of the symptom criteria, when in reality, it does make a lot of sense when you understand what autistic neurology actually means. Our society isn't built to support monotropic focusers. Our society is built to only support people to focus on multiple things at the same time, a little bit every single day. For her, she would work best off of having the freedom to hyper-focus on something and then be able to forget everything else for however long she needs. And then once she has it resolved, she can move on back to her life. But because society isn't built for people like her to actually monotropically focus, that monotropic hyperfocus is seen as a negative trait, a trait to fix in order to become functional again.
Where are you? We had a session starting 20 minutes ago. Angela, what are you doing? This is rude.
So we're going to see her therapist basically ridicule and criticize her for being hyper-focused because she says this is an ongoing thing that you struggle with where you focus so much on this one thing that you neglect everything else. And that's not how you're supposed to be. That's not what we're working towards. We need to fix this part of you in order for you to be functional.
This is the sort of thing we wanted to leave behind, isn't it? Thinking about something to the exclusion of all else.
Even though the therapist is trying to help her and help her become more functional.
And at what point are you going to say enough? My life starts now.
And she's not just ridiculing her because she hates her and wants her to feel bad about herself. It still doesn't negate the fact that it is extremely harmful.
I think a woman might need help.
Maybe you've just replaced your real stresses with this.
And I think that's the main difference working with someone who is autism-informed versus someone who's not. When you don't understand the why behind it and you're just telling someone to do something, on one hand, the tool you're giving them doesn't actually work for them. So it's not sustainable and it may not even be beneficial for them. And two, you're discouraging them from being able to actually find a way to hone in on that specific autistic trait, build accommodations around it so that they could partake in it in a way that doesn't harm them. Whereas if you work with someone who is able to understand the reasons behind your behaviors because they understand autism, they could say, hey, your tendency to hyperfixate is so strong that you begin to neglect taking care of yourself, and that's not good for you. So let's figure out a way for you to hyper focus where you could still take care of yourself. Whereas someone who isn't autism informed would just say, stop hyper focusing. That's not good. We need to get you to figure out how to multitask more and balance your life out more and avoid hyper focus. Does that make sense? Like, one isn't demonizing the autistic trait and making a person assimilate and mask the autism. It's actually figuring out a healthier, more effective way for this person to integrate their autistic traits in their life where they don't become disabled by their autism. It's also more sustainable because when you find how to properly integrate your autism, you could actually have an opportunity to find more and more function in your life, maybe even hone in on and discover your superpowers because you have the capacity to do so because you're not on survival mode all the time. So if she found a way to healthily integrate her hyperfixations, she could accomplish so many amazing things, but not at the expense of herself. Whereas if she was learning how to just avoid hyperfixating because it's seen as a negative trait, she'll go through her life constantly feeling discombobulated because she's making herself ignore key aspects of herself while constantly doing things that don't really make sense to her. And then when she ultimately falls back to her natural patterns that she's built to have, she not only feels guilty about it, but it completely derails everything else because her life was forcibly built with the wrong systems and with the wrong tools. And this is the frustrating part of the conversation because even in the previous videos that I made about Angela, I see comments like, you can't expect the world to just accommodate you all the time. What makes you guys so special? Just because you're autistic doesn't mean you should get a pass on things or an excuse on things. And those comments are very upsetting because they're not even joining the conversation that I'm trying to have. The conversation isn't we don't ever have to do anything or be responsible and then everyone takes care of us like we're newborn babies. The conversation is how do we have space to step in and be as responsible and effective people in our society without having to be disabled at the same time. To put it into dummy terms, people are saying, why you do nothing and get everything? And what I'm trying to say is, how do we do everything without losing everything in the process? Does that make sense? If you guys see comments like that, don't respond to it. I usually do a pretty good job in blocking those types of people, not because I'm trying to block discourse, but because I feel like that discourse isn't progressive. It doesn't get anywhere. It keeps you in a loop of defending and fighting, and it's not explorative, right? It's not our job to get people to step up and be educated because at the end of the day, they don't want to be educated. They just want to fight their point. My goal in my channel is to progress the conversations forward, explore deeper, understand better. If I feel like discourse isn't progressing, that discourse is not welcome in my community, at least. That's the thing. They're super free to go create another community or join another community where they just want to debate all the time, back and forth, debate. But at least in my community, I'm not interested in that sort of discourse. Okay, so now let's talk about what it would look like to effectively integrate hyperfocus into society and into our lives. It would look like going for roles that allows you to more deeply focus without constant interruptions. It would look like allowing yourself longer uninterrupted work periods and not having to deal with frequent meetings and mandatory check-ins that break your focus. It would look like measuring success by results rather than adherence to rigid schedules or proper working methods. It would look like structuring education around your passions and deep dives rather than broad, shallow coverage of subjects. It would look like allowing students to work in ways that align with their focus cycles rather than forcing constant context switching. It would look like encouraging mentorship and project-based learning instead of penalizing those who can't thrive in traditional test-based systems. It would look like having supportive tools that can help you maintain self-care without you needing to use your actual executive functioning for that. So having external sources be able to remind you when to drink water, eat food, take some breaks, things like that, rather than you having to think of it yourself. It would look like giving people the freedom to pop in and out of work in a way that makes sense for them. So sometimes that could look like having longer, more intense work periods with longer breaks in between. That would look like educating other people on what hyperfocus is and how it doesn't necessarily translate into irresponsibility or neglect. It would look like moving away from our concept of what well-rounded means. Being well-rounded shouldn't just have to mean that you could delegate your focus into multiple tasks at the same time, but it could also mean valuing deep, specialized contributions. This would also mean acknowledging that different neurotypes thrive under different conditions. What can look like imbalance to some may be the most effective way to function for others. So the core goal here, the core concept that I'm trying to reiterate again and again, instead of asking us autistic folks to suppress our natural cognitive strengths, we should be designing environments where autistic traits such as hyperfocus and monotropic focus has the ability to be an asset without being a source of self-destruction. But with that being said, you guys, I hope today's video has been helpful and enlightening for you. If there's anyone in your life that you think could benefit from educating themselves on autistic monotropic focus, then please, by all means, feel free to send them this video. Give this video a like and leave a comment down below. It really, really does help me a lot. I work really, really hard on these videos, so engaging with my content really does help get my video out there for other people to discover my channel, my videos, and to ultimately help me sustain this work and what I'm doing. If you guys want to continue to support me even more, you can always become a member to my YouTube channel. You could always donate by hitting the heart thanks button down below, and you could always become a patron. By becoming a member to my Patreon or my YouTube members, you will gain access to videos that is not available to other people, or you could gain early access to videos that I have yet to publish to the public. After I finish this 𝗫𝗵𝐿 commentary series, I will be uploading the full commentary / reaction on my Patreon. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure to keep your eye out for that. I basically had to splice up my commentary a lot in order to meet YouTube's copyright restrictions. And a lot of folks would prefer to just watch the movie with me and hear my commentary throughout watching the movie. I can't really do that on YouTube without getting demonetized. And if I'm demonetized, I can't pay rent. And if I can't pay rent, I can't do this job because I have to go out and work other jobs, and you know how it goes, right? Next week's video is actually going to be the last installation of this 𝗫𝗵𝐿 commentary series. In that last video, I will be talking about autism and trauma. I always hear people saying things like, I don't know if I'm autistic or if I'm just traumatized. And although I understand that sort of questioning and that sentiment, I always like to say, why can't you have both? Because oftentimes you can have both. You know, just because you're autistic doesn't mean you can't have gone through something traumatic. And something traumatic that would traumatize even non-autistic people, how does that impact an autistic person? I really want to deep dive and deconstruct that, because as you guys will see, we're ending today's video in Angela about to leave her apartment for the sake of being able to report this crime, and we will really see why she goes to great lengths in order to avoid leaving her apartment. It's because of not only her trauma that she's went through, but it's also because of the trauma of being an autistic person existing in society that is way too overstimulating and overwhelming. So we will really see what it looks like for her to push herself out into society despite her trauma, and how much that dysregulates her nervous system. But yes, you guys, thank you for tuning in on today's video. Make sure you take some time today to drink some water, eat some yummy food, and take yourself on a lovely walk. I will see you guys on the next one. Take care. You take one simple daily act, like walking from your apartment to work, that wouldn't faze average people, but they show how traumatic something as objective as that can be for an autistic person who is very sensory sensitive.
𝗵𝐿, play Sabotage. 𝗵𝐿, max volume.
This is just a reminder to hold yourself to your own standards and be okay with that. You're more likely to find function if you walk to the beat of your own drum. If you don't, and you keep pushing yourself to assimilate by everyone else's standards, you will probably go the rest of your life never finding your strengths and constantly thinking of yourself as a weakness.